an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Cradle Book 10, Reaper, chapters 9 and 10. In these chapters, our friends make it into the labyrinth and begin to face what it seems like are like enemies, and it turns out is just Subject 1 rolling over in his sleep, which is terrifying. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode. Hi, Andy, if you're out there. So, y'all, this section is obviously, we're beginning to dip into the next phase of plot. The next, what's the word I want? Arc. And I am really excited because obviously we're going to get some more focus on Jai Long and his sister and Lyndon's sister. And I can't tell you guys how startling it is as a reader to find a writer who can make me truly care about characters other than Lyndon, Yaren, Mercy, Ethan, and Zeal. That team is so dynamic. We've gotten to know them so well. And yet, I still really, really care about these other three. And that is just not something that you come across that often. You guys know what I mean. You go from one character that you're stoked about, and then the next chapter opens and you're in another POV and you're like, I don't want to do this right now. And I'm so used to that feeling of I'm going to have a few chapters that I'm super into, and then I'm going to have to bear it while I go through some other bullshit character. And it's so nice to not only not feel that way, but in a way, I feel like I'm getting something that I have been wanting for a while, because you guys know how much I liked Jai Long right away. It's funny. I think I told you guys that I got Owen to read this series, and he's currently in the midst of Reaper, and he's like, you need to catch up to me. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. Don't you dare say that to me. But he was in the second book and hated Jai Long. Hated him. Really. And I could not understand it. And I do get it in a way, because he was a shitty person in a lot of ways, but I just found him so sympathetic in so many ways. And I found the relationship that he had with his sister really compelling. And I just found it so funny how different our reactions were to him. I don't know if this is something that you guys experienced also. Are you like me and you were kind of interested and excited to see him again? Or did you not really give a shit? Because I feel like with Owen, he didn't really care about Jai Long. And so when he turned up again, Owen was just kind of like, oh, this guy. Right. I forgot about him. While I was like, Jai Long is here. Oh my God. Yay. I got so happy. And I had said in the last episode how obviously Jai Long is into Lyndon's sister, and I was calling it. And then we get in this section, I'm just going to talk about the Jai Long section. I'm calling it that because it's in his POV out of the gate, because then I can focus pretty much on everything else that's going on. But it turns out that Lyndon's sister actually straight up told him that she's interested in him. And guys, I know that this is not something that should be shocking, but I really love how direct she is. And there's a moment where he describes the way that she behaves compared to Lyndon. And he says something about how Lyndon always looks like he's spoiling for a fight. But Jai Chen is his sister. Kelsa looks like you have 100% of her attention at all times. So they both have this extreme intensity about them. But it's different coming from each of them. And I really wonder about it because, like, everybody says that Lyndon looks like he's spoiling for a fight. But also, Lyndon is, like, kind of huge. And I can't help but wonder, like, if you are looking at a dude that's his size and he is looking at you as if you have 100% of his attention, I feel like that's still going to come across as wanting a fight. You know what I mean? Like, I think that to a degree, he's not going to escape the perception that he wants a fight. Whereas Kelsa, I'm sure it's like different for her. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that some of that is just like the way you're built and perceived by other people. And that's just kind of out of your control. And speaking of the way that we are built and perceived by other people, Kelsa has advanced and she has a gold sign that she does not like. And I found this very interesting. It's a foxtail of purple white foxfire. And she hates it because it is not practical. She's like, other people have gold signs that are actual weapons, and I just get this fucking tail. Like, lame. And it's really interesting because I completely understand her point of view on that. Like, Yaren's got arms of swords that can fight on her behalf. Like, does it get better than that? That's amazing. Lyndon's, his gold sign is his, like, eye is changing color. That's not necessarily, like, actively practical, but it has a certain effect. You know, it's got an intimidation factor, and that is something that I don't think you can put a price on. It's a very nebulous sort of helpful. But she's complaining about this to Jai Long when she knows that he got saddled with a gold sign that, like, ruined his life, basically. And I thought it was really interesting. In his perspective, I'm expecting him to be, like, kind of resentful of her complaining and being like, wow, what's it like to hate your gold sign? Oh my God, it must be really hard. Shut up. Like, I truly expected him to sort of push back against it. And instead, he sees a sort of, like, understandable, like, reasoning for her to come talking to him about it, because he's going to have more sympathy than other people would. He's going to understand what it's like to get a gold sign that you don't like. And he considers it a mark of her being familiar and trusting him. I love that so much. I really do. Like, there's something about that. It just takes it to another level for me in terms of, like, Jai Long's appreciation of her as a person and his understanding, like, her intention versus how it could come across if it were anybody else. And it just gave it a different aspect that I hadn't considered, and certainly never thought he would have considered, that makes me feel like there's just more between them than I was originally, like, giving it. And I don't know if that's actually true, but it just showed a subtlety of thought in Jai Long. And I can, like, I'm not trying to say Jai Long is stupid by any means, because we know he's not, but he can be very hyper-focused at the expense of other things. And so I kind of expected him to be, you know, just take it the one most obvious way. And instead, it was a lot more, like, balanced, and almost, there was almost a sense of, like, gratefulness to it. You know, like, he was like, I never had anybody feel comfortable enough around me to just talk about something like this in front of me. Everybody's been so delicate about it, you know? And I really liked that. So she comes by to ask him if he wants to train together. And they get off talking on her gold sign and everything. And then she brings it back and she's like, you didn't answer me. Do you want to train together? And he asks, well, why do you have to, like, formally ask me? It doesn't make a difference. And she says, it's romantic. And it says Jai Long missed a step, but she gave him a confused look. What? I told you I was interested in you. Guys, I cannot tell you how delighted I was. Like, I already knew that he was interested. It seems very clear to me. He's sort of like, I won't say resisting it, but he's clearly not sure of himself. And I was worried that this was going to take a while. You know, I thought maybe we were going to have to sit here and watch them stumble through this a lot more. And finding out that she had already talked to him about this. And despite that he isn't exactly on board. And that's not to say that he isn't interested, because I think he is, but he's obviously not sure how to handle it. And as he puts it, nobody has ever been interested in him. Like, you know, probably when he was a kid, there was some interest just based on the fact of his position within the family. But here is somebody who, despite his gold sign being disfiguring, essentially, absolutely like looks past that. And it's just kind of like, yeah, but what's up though? What that gold sign do though? And I am into it. And I really appreciate Kelsa for this. I really just am so happy that we have gotten to circle back around to Lyndon's family and have at least one person be truly empathetic. You know, we liked Kelsa, or at least I did, from the start, because she seemed to put the most effort into trying to be fair to Lyndon. Like, you know, she was working within a society that only did so much, and she did the maximum that was pretty much allowed by that society to be kind. And that's, you know, one could say that's such a low bar. And admittedly, it kind of is. But also, a lot of people don't meet it, because that's just how people are. And I'm just so happy to come back to her and see her beginning to develop in other ways, and watch how she handles her brother being more powerful than she is. And just see her fighting style, or not fighting style, but her training style. And I am super into the fact that Jai Long doesn't understand her interest in training. And he thinks about how Lyndon, literally every spare moment Lyndon has, he spends training. And it's certainly tapered off. As we know, he spent the last year doing more relaxing than they have done in a long time. But it's clearly, you know, unusual. We've finally gotten a little bit of a look at how different people handle using their power, and the fact that his sister wasn't able to advance easily. And Lyndon is sort of puzzled by that, because he just assumes that everybody has this natural talent with Madra that he has, and is startled when he realizes that's not necessarily true. Because I think in a lot of ways, and I have said this for myself as well, while Lyndon is clearly gifted, it can be easy to think that he's also gotten really lucky and gotten a lot of like advancement boosts that other people wouldn't have access to. And maybe that's the reason that he's more powerful, and not just because of his own dedication. But we've managed to like get a pretty good balance where I can admit, yes, that he is absolutely privileged in how much he was able to like stumble into. I mean, Ghostwater alone, I mean, that was insanity. So there is some luck involved, but Kelsa has access to some of these tools, and she literally can't use them because she isn't able to control her Madra. So the fact that Lyndon and she are so obsessive about training, but Jai Long isn't, I find really fascinating, because I would have expected Jai Long to be more interested. He considers it work, and he thinks it's tedious and boring and just the thing that you have to do because you have to do it. He views this like I view jogging. It's like, all right, I know it's good for you, and I know that it does help in the end, but I don't look forward to it. And while I'm doing it, I am watching the clock for how long it is until I get to stop, because I can't wait to be done with it. And Kelsa's here, waking up, hype, already dressed, poking him like, wake up, it's time to go jogging. And he's like, but why? We don't have to jog together. I don't even want to do this. Honestly, I really, really sympathize. And like I said, I was surprised because I would have expected him to be somebody who, considering how single-minded he had been, I keep forgetting, he was single-minded when we first met him in his training because he was trying to advance in order to like take over his family out of spite, out of vengeance for the way that he was treated. So that goal is no longer there driving him. And his sister has recovered and is like doing much better. And I think that was like a secondary huge force that was driving him. So with those two things taken away, it has utterly changed his attitude. And I'm wondering if that's something that's going to like tie in with his insight, because he still hasn't gotten to Underlord yet. And I'm wondering if that's going to change for him at any point, because it's a shame if it's like that tedious for him. I don't love that for him. And if, you know, like, I just keep wondering about his gold sign too, if there's any way to like change or fix it or do anything. And I'm wondering if he were to advance, what will that do to him? You know, because he has thought about how Yaren's like scars all disappeared and wonders like, how would that even manifest when I look like this? Like, what would that do? And I am dying to know. So in the midst of the conversation, Kelsa and he are talking about this, and then his sister shows up and is like consulted about whether she thinks that training together is romantic. And she stops for a second and is like, actually, I could see that, because like it's intimate and you're kind of alone together. It has to be the right person, but I could understand seeing it that way. And I was like, I guess, like, I get what she means, you know, but when somebody has the kind of attitude that Jailong has, I feel like it might ruin it a little bit. Like, there have been times when I'm doing weightlifting that I wish Owen also was interested in weightlifting, because I would like to do it with him and have that experience together. But I know how much he would hate it, and it would put like a huge damper on my own enjoyment of something that I really like. And so I feel like I pass, you know. It's better to just try and find something you both truly enjoy instead of forcing somebody through a thing that they're not really into. However, you know, he's going to be training anyway. It's not like, you know, Lyndon. Oh my God, I called Owen Lyndon. I think that's a good thing though, honestly. Anyway, Owen not being interested in weightlifting, he just doesn't do anything. Like, it's not that there's like an alternative, but Jailong isn't super excited about training together, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be training. So you may as well. I'm rooting for the two of them. And in the midst of this conversation, they get interrupted by a voice announcing that everybody from low gold up needs to report to this center and be prepared to potentially be sent to battle immediately. And they go over to this column of shadow that's clearly a portal. And because it's staying open, Jailong is like, they might literally send us now. Oh, shit. And he goes to get evaluated, and he knows that they'll take him. And he's pretty sure that they will take Kelsa. But his sister, he doesn't expect to take. He doesn't expect to be taken, I should say. And it turns out that they both get approved, and he's pretty anxious about it. He tries at first to just be like, she shouldn't be here. And the guy who's like logging him in essentially is like, yo, dude, I don't know how to tell you this, but that is not up to me. And she meets the criteria, so she's going, and that's not really a thing you can stop. I can have it so that she's on your team because you'll be in charge of a team because of your rank, but otherwise no control over that. My bad. What can you do? And when they finally go through and he realizes that he is back in Sacred Valley, he's like, there is no escape from this place. Oh my God. And I don't know why, but his total distaste for Sacred Valley, I love it. I find it so funny. It's just so like understandable, you know, like, I mean, what's to like? Let's be honest. There's not much. And the fact, like, it's like the sort of thing that you would almost expect from somebody who had grown up there It's like somebody who grew up in a really shitty small town, and they keep trying to like make it in the big city, and they keep having to go home again and like move back in with their parents, or, you know, take a job that they didn't really want. Like, it just feels like that kind of thing. So I found that so funny. I enjoy that a lot. So the whole thing with that portal and being called to battle is because of what's going on with Malice. This scene is really interesting. It goes in a few directions that, you know, as she shows up, she's feeling so confident and almost like excited, because it seems like when she first rolls in, she's just angry and sees all of these different, like, you know, cloud cities essentially, that she's like, wow. Oh, so you all knew then already. That's fucked up. You know what? Fuck all y'all. And she is about to just unleash. And there's a sort of like excitement about that, you know, and she actually says out loud, thank you so much for giving me such a great excuse. And she unleashes one of her bolts in that direction, and it gets intercepted by another bolt, which causes them to both explode to the point that it's like a small hurricane that sends these clouds like tipping. And she realizes, oh, fuck. Okay, somebody's here. And she says, what a wonderful veil you have. She didn't enhance her voice with aura at all. Miles away. I want to make sure that sinks in, because I don't feel like I appreciated that the first time I read it. I'm thinking of it as they are a couple football fields away from one another. No. Miles away. A blonde woman in gold armor strode out onto the edge of the Silent Servants Island. Larian of the 8-Man Empire wrapped her knuckles on her own breastplate. Wish I could take credit for it, but I'm more about hitting things with sticks from very far away. And Malice does a whole, like, I guess you side with the beasts. I thought you liked being on the winning team. And Larian says, I know that you're trying to do this whole human versus beast thing, and it may have worked when we had dragons, but that's not actually how this thing is shaking out anymore. And also, not all of us are human anyway, so it doesn't really work. And this is the thing. We're bringing this up again. Larian says, you know why we're doing this. The monarchs are the only ones who benefit from the system the way it is. It's about time we shake things up. This has been brought up before, and I've never really gotten a totally clear answer on what it is that we're trying to do here. I understand people being frankly resentful of the hierarchy and the fact that monarchs have the kind of like power that they do, and they have to direct their attention at what kinds of disasters they're willing to intercept and what they aren't. You know, we saw this back when Malice had to intervene with the Bleeding Phoenix, and it was a favor that she was doing for Ethan, and it wasn't like it was not something that she just did because it was the right thing to do. And there was a cost to it, as we find out. But I don't really understand what it is that they are proposing instead of the current system. That's my thing. This is sort of the difficulty that can come up. And I would like to preface this by saying there is a plan. But a lot of people will try and say, when you say defund the police, well, I'd like to hear about an alternative that you have. There are several places that you can go to find a complete outline about the ways in which we would implement that money instead for a much fairer social system rather than a punitive? I think it's punitive. Anyway, there is an alternative plan. It just gets buried because people don't want you to hear about it, because they want to make it seem as if oh, they're just saying this like really overly simplistic thing. They just want to act like we can just end policing altogether and then that will be like a complete anarchy, but we'll be fine. That's not it at all. There's a whole fucking like structure that could be put in place that we have seen small examples of done excellently and super effectively other places. It's there. And this team may also have something like that, but I, as a reader, haven't seen it yet. And so I find this interesting because as soon as she says this, my instinct is to like align it with the sort of eat the rich attitude, which I definitely subscribe to. But it's right on Shen. And like, even if we weren't inside his head, knowing full well that he intends to like leash these fucking terrors for his own good, even if I didn't know that for sure, I would absolutely assume that. And that's essentially what Malice says. She's like, I'm sorry, you want to what? And you've teamed up with who? That's like being like, oh yeah, we're really gonna shake up the class system and the you know, gap between rich and poor by teaming up with Jeff Bezos. What? No, he doesn't want that. If he wanted that, he could have done something already, like pay his people. But no. And so eventually it comes out that punitive, thank you, Caleb. Eventually it comes out that they got paid a fucking lot. And this was so funny, you guys. I was listening to this audiobook. And Larian's speech about how much he paid and how it already was a lot of money, but then he kept carrying more and more treasures out and putting them on the pile. Her speech about this goes on for so long. I couldn't help but like sort of love it. She does, first of all, the whole, he paid us so much, and like it does a whole like miming of physically staggering, like she can't hold it all. And then, you know, how he kept bringing it out, and then priceless art, right onto the pile. Gold, pile. Scales, weapons, natural treasures, pile. By the time he was done, I swear on my heart, it was taller than my head. Best day of my life. I adore this so much. And unfortunately, like, this is what can happen. You're like, okay, I want to subscribe ideologically to what you're selling. And even if I can't trust you, you're offering me enough perks that I'm gonna do it anyway just to see what happens. And that's essentially like, she says to Malice, we don't need to be able to like see every move before we take a single step. We're going to do something to shake things up at all. It may not be the entirely correct direction, but it's better than just standing fucking still. Plus, yeah, we're getting rich. And I can't say that I like totally disagree. That's the thing about shaking a system up. You don't get it right the first time. You like, and that's even saying that you're ever going to get it right, which Lord knows is certainly a subjective assertion. But I think that what she's saying about just we need to literally do anything because it's better than nothing makes sense if you are living in a universe that is sort of, there is just such a distinct gap of power between people. That said, I do find it interesting about how it's the 8-man empire saying this, because they are all together essentially like equal a monarch. But so they're like part of the group that they're sort of angry with, but they're also not really. And that's fascinating with me as well. Is the 8-man empire a direct response to the way things with monarchs are? Did they create this ability because they wanted to be like, you know what, monarchs, fuck you. Like, if we work together, we can come up with something. I like it. So Malice is looking at her going, all right, so he definitely has other people, or she definitely has other people with her. And then all of the rest of them unveil themselves. And Malice's people also unveil themselves. 3 heralds, a sage, and 5 ancient archlords. And Malice is like, first of all, I was sort of initially badass, yay, you're prepared. But then Malice is like, even with this, I'm sort of outclassed here. This is going to be like really tight. And I got a little bit panicky. And I am just into it. You know, this whole like, I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to have my people behind me. You know, I'm going to have forces that are veiled to surprise your ass as well. But that doesn't mean that I just win. I am excited to see a fight like this. I want to know what happens, you know? And when they each like unveil themselves, by the way, we get their I don't know if I want to say names. It's the name of the band that each of, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but that each of the 8-man empire members runs. Is that correct? So she yells, Larian says, long sight. Then we've got Ghost Blade, Blood Chorus. I feel like I've mentioned before how insane that sounds. Flame Gift, Green Stride. I don't know, guys. I don't know about that Blood Chorus. Maybe Blood Song? I feel like Blood Song I could do. Blood Chorus, that's a no for me, dog. I don't really get it. I don't like it. That's the one misstep out of like the names that Will has given, and God knows there's a lot in this series. There's only been like a couple that have made me stop and go, really? And I don't think I've even then been like, no, I don't like that. This is the first one that I've actively not liked. So I think that's actually a pretty fucking impressive record. So this is when we end with, Raygun Shen had often claimed he wanted to call the Dread Gods together to destroy them and make them into weapons. Even if that were true, it would ruin her lands. So she would crack open this formation and destroy Shen's plans, even if she had to drown them in blood. And I do not doubt her for a second. She absolutely would. Evil says, not a response, but they do not cause the problem. Will said, not in the book, so not a spoiler. Caleb says, Evil, shush, you're towing a line there, brother. I have to agree, Evil. Just because it's like not in the books, if you're giving me information that I wouldn't have as a reader, that kind of counts. So I would avoid anything that like I'm not going to be able to get from the material. You know, that's probably just a good rule of thumb. Rob says, can't really be a band if you're a chorus. Oh, Rob, get out of here. Caleb says, Blood Song is already taken by another fantasy series. Oh, okay. Same thing. He wanted Lil Blue to be a blue spear until he got snaked by another way more famous author. Oh, no. Who's that? Blue spear is not familiar to me. So forgive me, guys. I'm not like, you know, I haven't read tons of fantasy. Considering that what my job is, I have to sort of stay away from stuff in case people want to commission it or in case I decide to cover it. So I can be really sort of like afraid to dip my toe into things, especially if they're really popular. Oh, Caleb says Sanderson. Gotcha. Well, I personally like Lil Blue because it's just adorable. And I don't know if that informed the way her personality developed and if she would have been different if she were named Blue Spear, but I like Lil Blue. It's the fact that she's got this like adorable name, but then she's out here just like leveling Lyndon's sister. It's great. I like that like contrast, you know? Especially when we like have her verse Orthos. It's a nice contrast. I like it. I'm going to bounce back to the start of chapter 9. We get more about Azrael and his history and the way that things worked when he joined the Abaddon. His initial compatibility tests came back with unprecedented results. He had maximum potential in 6 of the 7 divisions. It quickly became clear that he could inherit the mantle of any judge except one, Suriel. He had no compatibility with the Phoenix at all, as though his very existence was in opposition to the concept of restoration. And so he starts trying to like make things, and he's really into restoring because he sort of doesn't like his connection with destruction. It's just something he like, I think he takes offense to it almost a little bit, and he can't change what he is. It's not, I don't know if it's just not possible in general or if it's not possible for him specifically. But it feels like because of how incredibly gifted he is in his field, it would make it more difficult to change. You know, it's the sort of thing where he has swung so far to the right that trying to go to the left would take a lot more effort than normal for the average person. So eventually he manages to gather the materials to make this fucking weapon. And this is like, he forged them in the energy of a stolen world seed with enough power that it could have birthed an entire iteration. By doing so, he indeed created a peerless weapon, a scythe that would let him fight like a judge. But he did not expect the recognition of the way. He became the avatar of true destruction, the opposite of lost creation. And when he was taken into custody by the Court of Seven for his creation of the scythe, the court was in awe. So he makes this thing. He's like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. And then they see what he made and they're like, oh my God, you did it. They wanted something of, he had managed to create something, and we've heard this before, that will completely eliminate iterations and make things easier to manage. It's all cleaner now, but he's the only one who can do it. So as we saw with Suriel's perspective earlier, that's all he does. And he, like, I had thought of it as this was his job and he enjoyed it at first and it began to wear on him. But reading this now, we learn he never wanted to be a destroyer. That wasn't anything that he was like happy about. He didn't delight in it to begin with. So it's not surprising that he eventually is like, I do not want to do this anymore. I don't want to be this person. With the exception of Machiel, who urged that Osmanthus be executed. Machiel, you are such a little bitch. The other judges agreed that Osmanthus should be given the mantle of the Reaper and raised up as their peer. He was even granted a new name, Azrael. I swear to God, I really feel for this guy. Like, the more I learn about how this all went, it just feels like, yeah, he's a genius, and yeah, he has this amazing power, and so there's a point at which you're like, pity him, like, why? But it just feels almost like his abilities just defined his entire life in a way that there was no real choice about how things were gonna go. And I know that's not actually true. He made all kinds of choices that he didn't have to make. They were, consciously made decisions that determined the course of his life. It's not all just fate. But man, that's a hard thing to fight against when it's this level of genius, That feels like a losing battle. I don't know. So let's see. But Machiel's such a petty little rat, says Caleb. Oh my God. Petty. That's the word. That's the word. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Caleb. So this is when we go to the ancestor's tomb. And this is just really, I have to say that I personally am feeling a lot more like Mercy in this section. And I don't know how you guys all feel. But Mercy is basically like, okay, let's get going. Let's go. Let's do this. Guys, can we please focus? We really should just fucking get started. Thank you. Yeah. Guys, can we? You're in a field that's eating your power. Let's get the show on the road. We don't want to be here any longer than we have to. And I feel like everybody's acting a little bit too fucking cavalier about that. And by everyone, I mean Lyndon. Lyndon, you are a part of this kind of energy in a way. So I can only assume it's probably not really mentally affecting you the same way it might be other people. And also, we know Lyndon's a fucking pack rat. Like, Lyndon, my friend Candace plays Skyrim, and I have started playing like a couple months back. And we were talking about mods because I play on the Switch, and there really aren't any way to do mods on the Switch. But she has a mod that allows her unlimited carrying capacity. So she picks up everything. Like, we're talking, she takes like the jugs and tankards and wooden plates and iron pots, all the shit that you're just like, that's so not worth it. She takes everything. And while I wouldn't say Lyndon is quite that bad, I feel like he's like not that far off. It's just that his power has grown to a point where those things aren't worth it. But you get the sense that if it were an option, if he could make a mod or a cheat where he could take everything he ran across, I could see him being the one to activate that and be like, yeah, I mean, what's the harm? I may want something of this later, eventually, you know? I could see him turning into somebody who's got like a massive warehouse filled with shit that he thinks he should keep, but he'll never use. So this is like the fact that he keeps slowing down and examining things and checking things out. On the one hand, I understand his caution and he's feeling this sort of like connection to things, but I just want him to stop and think about the fact that like Mercy and Zeal are not at his level. He has to extend protection to Orthos and Lil Blue, which he didn't know he could do, because they are like in a little bit of pain once they get sealed. And I just don't know if he's fully appreciating the effect it might be having on the people who already are starting with less power than he has, you know? I don't know. It's also like, because it's hunger Madra and it's like, it's going to eat away at your power. He has also got like massive Madra reserves because of his core being expanded because of the cycling technique that he uses. So I am expecting for him to like be able to put up with that for longer. I may be wrong about that, but it sounded like when we were with Rhaegon Shen, he expends his power and there's no getting that back and like recharging. You know, there's no, he can like maybe to a tiny degree, but it feels very much like use it and lose it is the rule in here. So I want him to like be a little bit more aware of that for the sake of his friends. And I can understand him being as distracted as he is. It's not just what the labyrinth is. It's also like this was under his home this whole time. So I could see that being really distracting also. Like this was here this entire time. And they also get like a little bit of a moment with Elder Whisper, who comes up and thinks that they are the ones who deactivated the suppression field. And I really love this. He comes running up and is like, what the fuck did you do? And then they all turn and look at him with their fucking power unveiled, staring him down. And he has to take a moment and like hold his hands up and back up and be like, hey, sorry. Can I ask what it is, respectfully, that you all are doing? It's just like, oh man, that must be really hard. So yeah, when he realizes that they're going in, but they didn't lower the field, he's like, oh, okay, well, good. Glad somebody's dealing with it. And they mention too that they think somebody else is already in there. And Whisper's like, I never saw anybody enter or leave, but also there's entrances that I just can't keep my eye on right now. So it's possible, I suppose. And this is when, do we have time for this? Zeal demanded. We don't, Mercy said. Thank you guys. Appreciate you. Rob says, ooh, the field is down, so it's not eating their power, but subject one's hunger techniques do leech a bit. Yeah, that's what I meant. It's essentially eating their power a little bit. It is. They forgot to say swiper, no swiping. The sage of the 5-finger discount. What is this a reference? I'm sorry, guys. That's not getting me. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure somebody heard me say this and is laughing, though. So for that person, you're welcome. So Yaren also, as they head in, I love Yaren's energy so much because I feel this way most of the time. It is better to know. It may not make you happy to find out. It may not be encouraging, but it's a kind of weapon to just know what you're heading into. And so she asks, like, how long does it take to get in all the way? And he says, well, it shifts around, and they say that if you can master the patterns of it, you can reach the heart of it in a day. But I've known people to spend months and years down there and never actually get to the center. Some of them never even made it out. And she's like, yep, all right, that's what I kind of figured. And just turns around and heads in. This information has no effect on her determination to do the thing. She's absolutely going to do the thing. That's not the question. She just wants information, and same. I am somebody who would much rather at least have the data. Thank you. I needed to just make sure that I was right in my assumption that this was probably like a losing battle I'm going into. And Lyndon also asks Dross for odds of survival. And Dross is like, well, with the info I've got, a little over 50%. And obviously it's like, yeah, not bad. And Lyndon says, this isn't cheering me up. And Dross replies, was that the goal? Then cheer up. The complete absence of mirth in Dross's voice did not help Lyndon's spirits. I am so sorry, Lyndon. I just feel awful that he is going to go through this fucking this obstacle course with a version of one of his closest friends that is like kind of a mean parody of it. That's just really, that's another distraction on top of everything, and like nobody else is ever going to quite understand because they're not in his head. There's no sense here. I know that Dross can project his voice so that everybody can hear him in their heads, but this doesn't seem like that's what's happening here. So Lyndon's the only one that's encountering this repeated, like, Dross isn't who he was. Dross isn't who he was. And I don't know if anybody else is going to really understand what it's like for him to have that weird change inside his mind all the time. And there's a point later where they come across this room that's full of, like, broken, rotted away tools. And he has to ask Dross, what do you make of this? Because Dross doesn't say anything. And then when Lyndon says Dross just says, yeah. Like, it's not an automatic, like, I understand what it is you want from me in this moment. They don't have the seamless sort of, like, relationship and understanding of each other that they did. And, man, that's a tough thing to lose. That's the thing. So they head in and get sealed in. And this is when Lyndon has to extend his protection. And Mercy says, we have some records of the outer layers of the labyrinth. This looks like one of the armories where Lord-level weapons were kept. Lyndon's heart clenched at the thought of what they might have found, and even Yaren gave a disappointed sigh as she pulled off one of the doors and found nothing within. And it's the kind of thing where I'm like, look, guys, I completely understand you being like disappointed that stuff isn't here, but also I really want you to consider that there might be better stuff the further in you go. So maybe you would have picked up some shit here and then been like, this is garbage once you got to the, 2/3 in and found some other much better shit. And I would guess that if it's like anything below maybe Archlord, Shen would have left it. And I may be wrong about that. I don't really know what Shen needed as he progressed through it, and he seemed pretty fucking prepared. It seemed like he had a piece of equipment for each stage because he had researched extensively and figured out what he needed. So I'm just assuming this, but I could be wrong. So I have faith that if there are goodies remaining, it's only going to get better. So just be patient, you guys. So then they go through this next room, and there are 3 exits. The door they came through, which has the sun carved into it, and the others have a hammer and a symbol that looks like Ethan's family crest, but it's slightly different. And we find out that Azrael changed up his personal crest for the family crest. The crescent was over the words instead of to the side. For another, the crescent was connected to a line running down the side. Now it didn't look like a crescent moon at all. It looked like the blade of a scythe. How unexpected, he said, in a tone that suggested it wasn't unexpected at all. And Lyndon's like, did the Aurelius clan build this? And Dross chimes in and is like, no, the founding of this facility is way too early. And Ethan says, yeah, that is very true. But then he mentions Osmanthus Aurelius, and he was one of the greatest soulsmiths of his day, perhaps in history. That was his personal crest, which was eventually adapted into the symbol of our house. And this is just really fascinating to me. As much as we are getting to know what Azrael was like, we still don't really have a good understanding of the relationship to the labyrinth and everything that was done here. So I am extremely curious about this. I just can't wait for more information. And Ethan's basically like, yeah, I knew that we were going to see marks of his down here, but I just didn't think it would be this quick. Like, we barely got in. And then we have Lyndon pulling out the key to see what happens, because it gives this sort of energy that he can tune into because of his connection with that kind of Madra, and he can sense which direction they should go in. But when he does this, it alerts Subject 1 in a way that's like, at the moment, kind of passive. It's mentioned later when there's a sort of rumbling reaction that it was like him swatting at a fly that landed on him in his sleep, or scratching in his sleep. It's not even a conscious thing. And it's like, proportionally something that they can actually deal with because it wasn't directed in a specific way. But that's not going to stay that way for very long. So Lyndon opens his box, uses the hand. He feels this like awful, empty hunger, like because of the hand. And then he has to like force his will over it, and it fights back. A high-pitched howl echoed through the stone walls. The hand tried to command the labyrinth to take it away, to escape. But Lyndon was in charge. If it were the full Dread God, he would have stood no chance. Over a long separated hand, though, Lyndon's willpower won out. The fingers went limp as the hand gave up, and then Lyndon felt his authority expand. It wasn't the same as his relationship with an icon. It felt more like his bond with his remnant arm. He could feel the hallway and the rooms ahead, and then he feels the anger of Subject 1, because it can feel that somebody, like, usurped it, and it does not like it, which I can't blame it for. Like, nobody likes that feeling. And then all of these hands come out of the floor. And we get, the details of how each of them handles this. They all manage to handle it. It's not a problem. But, it's interesting to see everybody's techniques and the way that they all, like, how effective they are in comparison to others. And, like, Ethan and Lyndon, because of how sort of immediately they're able to disperse the Madra, the hands just vanish, but they're like ghouls that continue to come out for everybody else. And they take care of it. It's fine. But it was just interesting to watch because it makes sense to me that the Madra that he and Ethan have would be uniquely qualified to, like, deal with something like this. And they have more of it, So, yeah, I feel like that's just going to continue. So at this point, Zeal had been touched by one of the ghouls. And he looks grossed out. They're worried that he's going to be, like, severely weakened. But it just brushed him. He says, lost a little Madra, a little soul fire, maybe some blood aura. Feels gross. And they're essentially like, okay, that's not too bad. But also, that could really add up because you're not, like, getting it back down here. So we better fucking mitigate that as much as we can. I mean, if anybody can't stand to lose some shit in this situation, it's Zeal. So in the next room, we go to the Hall of Hammers. And this was interesting because I expected Lyndon to react differently. Ethan tells him that this was a place that it contained soulsmith hammers. And Ethan expects Lyndon to react in the same way I did, because Lyndon loves soulsmithing, and I sort of expected him to be like, oh, really? Like, what does that mean? But instead he acts as if it's just a regular tool. Like the way that you would say, oh yeah, this room had a bunch of, like, hammers in it that, came from the DeWalt company or something. He doesn't really stop to consider what a soul-smithing hammer from a place like this is probably like, which startled me a little bit. And Ethan has to stop him and be like, it's not like just the physical thing. And he's in the midst of trying to explain this, and Mercy is just like, holy shit. Can we fucking talk about this and walk at the same time? What are we doing? Standing still. Sincerely, what are we doing? And then Orthos pulls a piece of wood away from the wall, and they can see that there is this, like, script at the bottom that's inactive. Ethan was gesturing him to the other side to show him a mostly intact hammer. Once upon a time, the tool you used for your soulsmithing was as important as the material you used. It was said that our patriarch could make a weapon fit for a sage with just his hammer and a gold remnant. The hammer is used to inject your will into an object, shaping its function according to your intentions. And each hammer has its own specialty, some being better for crafting weapons, some made for altering dream tablets, and so on. And I'm like, yeah, this makes complete sense, and would explain also why certain weapons feel so much more focused than others, because you have a tool to make it that is focusing your power in a certain way. So, yeah, this is probably only, as he says, useful to soulsmiths who can directly manipulate their willpower, so only lords. Meanwhile, Yaren and Mercy are considering leaving the two of them there. And finally, Lyndon is like, all right, well, I'll take these and put them in my void key, and then we'll get going. He opens his void key, but it takes a minute. And it says he would have to check its script. And I was like, I thought he would have realized that it's not the script. I don't, like, is it just that he doesn't have Dross in his head the way that he normally does? Because it feels like Dross should also notice this, but we know that Dross isn't volunteering information. So maybe it's just like Lyndon didn't ask, so Dross isn't telling him. But I feel like that should have been something he, like, realized was connected. So at this point, they have to use the hand again, and strands of forged Madra web up the entire room. And they are like, all right, well, maybe that's all it is, because they are able to block and cut, and they get out of it pretty quickly. And I was like, that can't be it, is it? Like, there's got to be something more to this. Let's see. The blue-white sphere filled the room, wiping out all the hunger Madra. Each strand resisted a little, holding a small amount of will behind it, but the entire room was clear in a moment. And this is when Lyndon says that he doesn't feel like it was a conscious attack. Zeal pushed himself up from the ground. It's definitely going to get stronger. Let's get deeper while we're still fresh. Thank you, Mercy cried. Whatever we do, we need to move. Amen, Mercy, sincerely. And he leads the way to the tunnel, and the tunnel vanishes. And there's just a blank stretch of wall. And everybody puts their guard up. But Lyndon is like, this doesn't make sense. And he's just looking around. There were still 2 entrances left. The hall they'd come from had vanished, just like the one they'd been headed into. And then there's just one in the ceiling. So they have to go up through the ceiling. And they wind up, and I have to wrap this up soon. They jump up with just the fucking one leap. They're able to make it in. I can't stand them. Like, other people have to pull themselves up and, but Lyndon and Yara can literally just jump. And when Ethan catches up with them, he's like not actually that graceful the way that he normally is. Enforcer techniques are my weakness. That and fine imported silk. These weaknesses have been logged for future reference, Dross said dutifully. Ethan looked startled. I really loved that so much. Like, they all know that that's part of what Dross does, is like, he figures out how people work so that Lyndon can fight them more effectively. Like, that's part of the thing. But it's one thing to, like, know that, and it's another thing to know it's happening right in front of you, that this was just a moment of data. That's gotta be weird. So there are all of these coffins and all of this stuff that's, like, very strong in death aura. And there's no exit, Ethan pointed out. All right, Mercy said, back down. She made as though to leap down the hole, but Lyndon had unraveled the case around the hand already. Hunger filled the room, and he sensed immediately where to go. It was a hallway sealed behind a blank stretch of wall. So they have to figure out a way to get through. Lyndon says we have to know what we're walking into. And he checks the room and then looks to Ethan. And he points to a map because his, like, bloodline ability is not strong in here. Old scripts have been painted around this skeleton, and Orthos runs up to it and grabs this scrap of paper. Let's see, he was writing a warning to a team coming after him. He warns against a guardian. He says it has powers beyond his understanding and calls it a baby dread god, the Tomb Hydra. Oh, really? I don't love that. The Tomb Hydra? No. I just don't want to deal with that at all. Thank you. And Orthos is really confident. He says something like, oh, his power was weighed down by the field. We won't be that weak. And I'm like, I mean, maybe? And even Lyndon is sort of like, I don't know, man. You saw this, like, Winter Steel badge that he had. And Orthos is like, yeah, I saw it. But he doesn't change his tune on this, which I found sort of weird. So, Yaren is in fact excited. You think we're going to get a real fight? And Lyndon himself isn't even frightened. He's just kind of like, I mean, I'm ready for it. But no, I'm not scared at all. Mercy just shrugs. And Zeal's like, well, the field worked on everything, so it's probably not even at its own full capacity. And And then Dross comes out. It is good to be optimistic. You will perform better if your spirits are up. But defeat here is not the greatest risk. We should consider the fact that any Madra or Soulfire we expend in this battle will be difficult, if not impossible, to replace. Our power is finite. Everyone grew more grim except Ethan, who beamed at Dross. Thank you for reintroducing some tension to the situation, Dross. You're welcome. Ha. Ha. The fake laugh told Lyndon that Dross thought he'd told a joke, but Lyndon wasn't sure which part the joke was supposed to be. I don't know either. I wish Dross would not open his mouth at these times and instead would volunteer information when it's something that's like useful and encouraging instead. I don't know. So it ends with, "Good thing it hasn't attacked us yet," Ethan shouted. It immediately attacked. And that is the end of chapter 10. And guys, don't get me wrong, I'm excited to find out about this Hydra and see how they cope with it, but I just don't want to deal with this Hydra. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't. I'm scared for them. I feel like it's just like they're all just too cool about it, and it's going to be something they don't expect. There's a reason that Rhaegon Shen was so worn down by the end of it, you know? I'm just not, I don't like it. So, I have to wrap. But thank you again very much to Andy for commissioning this. I hope that you guys will come and hang out with me next Tuesday with the next chapters. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.